This ended up not being nearly as long of a video as I expected, so I don't have to rush this intro along. Smash is my favourite game series, and Death Battle's my favourite web show. You'd think with Smash's wide variety of characters that plenty of them would have been on Death Battle before, but the entire Smash roster has fewer Death Battles than Marvel and DC individually, so yeah. But yeah, there are a ton of fun characters left for them to use, so I came up with a match for each of them. I'll briefly go over all of them and give my first impressions on who should win each one. Just note that I will not be going over any characters who have already been on Death Battle, and I won't be matching anyone against any other character that's already in Smash. Also, my friend ZDogS sent me a bunch of thumbnails to use for this, so any of the ones that look good, those are his work, so thanks to him for that. There's a lot to go over here, so let's make this quick. Ness vs Frisk, overpowered pacifist kids from RPGs, one of which is based off the other. Ness probably wins from what I hear, but I do not know how he's going to get past the timeline reset. Jigglypuff vs Parappa the Rapper. This is one of the last ones I came up with, and you can just tell I was out of ideas. These are both singing animals from kids games. Versus Wiki and Multiverse Match both tell me Parappa is city level and relativistic, so I'm gonna assume he wins. Huh, that was really all I had to cover for the 64 cast. Ice Climbers vs Coca-Cola Bear. Polar bears are a hazard in the Ice Climbers game, so sure. I'm gonna assume that the polar bear just mauls them both to death. Pichu vs Denki Kaminari. Kids who can fire lightning that also damages themselves in a way. Pichu being a baby Pokemon means he probably doesn't scale to any of the crazy stuff that more fully evolved Pokemon can pull off, so I'll probably side with Kaminari. Falco vs Raster. Birds that are infamous among the platform fighter community. Does Falco ever do anything outside his ship? I don't know, I haven't played any Star Fox games. I want to believe Raster wins though. Young Link vs Kid Goku. The kid versions are two of the most iconic characters in fiction, whose media has its own dedicated fandom amongst the rest of the fanbase, with many people considering them to be when their respective series peaked. I've heard Young Link is universal, but I've also heard that's bullshit, so I don't know what to believe. Is now a good time to say I've done no research into any of these? Mr. Game & Watch vs Felix the Cat. Some of the oldest characters in gaming and cartoon history. Game & Watch had nothing to work with, leave me alone. He also dies because Felix has cosmic level feats, which I doubt Game & Watch has. Meta Knight vs Zero. Edgy sword-wielding rivals to the main protagonist in platform games all about veritable versatility. CX says that Zero wins, so I'll take their word for that. Diddy Kong vs Spike. One is a funny monkey, one hunts monkeys, not much to say there. I want Spike to win just so it isn't, haha, the monkey beat the monkey hunter, bet you never expected that, isn't that funny? Lucas vs Razz, the guy from Psychonauts. I'd never heard of him until someone suggested him as a Lucas opponent, and this description on Google was enough to sell me on the match immediately. Olimar vs the Vessel. They small. Apparently this is really unfair against Olimar, which makes me really sad because I quite like him, but he had next to nothing to work with and I refused to use Ant-Man. Also, I really like the idea of a death battle where one character has to fight off an entire army. Rob vs Wally. Rob is one of the characters I desperately wanted to skip because he just does not have anything to work with. If Wally lost, I would be very sad. Toonlink vs Finn the Human. Cartoony sword fighter boys in magical fantasy worlds. This is the most common 1v1 request for both, so I think it could work. I've heard people say that Finn is between Planet and Universal, which, yeah, that narrows it down. That's quite a small range. Wolf vs Tai Lung. They are grey animal villains. Look, Wolf does nothing outside his ship apparently, so let me just use this as the outlet for funny leopard man shitposts. I had Steve as Villager's opponent before, but then Sakurai just had to put him in the game. Fuck's sake, Sakurai, why do you have to listen to your fans? Villager versus Minecraft Villager, sure. Or Stardew Valley, is that similar to Animal Crossing? I don't know. Wii Fit Trainer versus Ring Fit Trainer. Trainers in Nintendo Fitness games. Presumably we'd give Wii Fit her Smash moveset to give her a fighting chance, but she still probably loses anyway. Ring Fit is far more combat centric and leaves itself more open for feats. Rosalina vs Whis, cosmic guardians who mostly sit in the background, but prove themselves as the most powerful entity in their universe whenever they do step in. Whis stomps, but just let me have this one. The potential for the battle track alone is enough for me to want this. Little Mac vs Epo, a long-time request between fictional boxing icons. Leopold the Brave tells me Epo wins, everyone else I've ever seen discuss the match says Mac wins. I don't know who to believe, and I don't really care either. Greninja vs Rano, water elemental frog ninjas. It's also apparently fair since both hit mountain level and can dodge lightning apparently. This is probably the match I want most out of all of these. The Me vs the New Kid, player avatars with possibly more to work with than any other player avatar character. I haven't played either of the South Park games, but Versus Wiki tells me they're in a similar ballpark to what I've seen for the Me's. I would pop off for this episode, you have no idea. Palutena vs Mothra, goddesses of light with angelic servants. From what I hear, Kid Icarus has multi-solar system level stuff, while the most iconic incarnation of Mothra caps out at destroying a planet level meteor. But given the stats they've had for these characters in the past, I would not be surprised if they had Mothra win this. Pac-Man vs Yusuke, ghost hunters that are apparently both planet level. I can't not root for Pac-Man, I wouldn't want him to die. But if Yusuke did win, I'd want a scene where he blasts Planet Pac to pieces, that could be cool. Shulk vs Lightning, I don't know shit about either of these characters, but it's a really highly requested match from what I've seen, it would bring in a new series, and it uses a Final Fantasy game besides 7, so I'm down for it. Bowser Jr. vs Tronbon, kids and mechs with tiny robotic servants. Tron is from the weakest Mega Man series apparently, so I don't think she can compete with Mario characters. Duck Hunt Duo vs Cat Dog. Animal duos where one of the two is a dog. Sure. Inkling vs the player from Sunset Overdrive. Post-apocalyptic shooters with incredibly similar tones as well as a wide arsenal of weapons. The player especially has a lot of different weapons that would make for a really fun fight, which was the main reason I picked them over Bendy or Ika. Ridley vs Rayquaza, big Nintendo dragons. We need a legendary Pokemon death battle that isn't complete shit, even if Rayquaza dies. Simon Belmont vs Arthur. I've not played either series, so I cannot verify the connections beyond just boomer games. Actually, Ducko was the one who suggested this one, so that checks out. King K. Rool vs Blackbeard, giant pirate kings. K. Rool scales to Donkey Kong, and I've heard whether or not that's enough to beat Blackbeard. It depends if you want to scale Donkey Kong to the Mario cast. Isabelle vs Retsuko, animals that do office work. Apparently this is fair? I wouldn't doubt it since New Horizons' terraforming mechanic gives the Animal Crossing characters some building level calcs apparently. Isabelle in a fight to the death sounds cursed though. Incineroar vs King, cat themed wrestlers. Incineroar probably wins. I really doubt that King scales to the higher tier tech and stuff like Kazuya's volcano eruption.
We're treating these fighters a little differently and have decided to call them Echo Fighters.
Dark Pit vs Dark Meta Knight. I couldn't do Dark Pit versus just normal Meta Knight, so this is the next best thing I guess. Princess Daisy vs Daisy Duck. They are named Daisy and hardly ever appear in their series. If Daisy appeared before Mickey, Donald or Goofy, I would find that very funny. Richter Belmont vs Johnny Jostar, the 7th in their family line with infamously awful luck. I've heard that Castlevania would normally stomp JoJo's, but apparently Part 7 gives some really ridiculous stuff that would actually give Johnny the win. I don't know, I haven't watched JoJo's, so I can't really say. Dark Samus vs Cell, villains made artificially with the DNA of the main character. Don't know who wins because Metroid stats are confusing. Commission Ben TGM to let you use Perfection Replicated as the battle tracks, cowards. I might actually want this one more than Greninja vs Rano.
Okay, so I'm not Biffweed, but for the 3 people who care, you'd have noticed that all the Fire Emblem characters are missing. Not that some of you would mind though, but it's my favorite series, bar Pokemon, so I'll be covering the FE cast. It took some convincing on my part. I had to let Biff in on the secret of what turns the juice into marmalade.
You don't want to know.
But here we go. Marth vs Samurai Jack. At first glance, Marth and Jack don't have a lot of similarities. They don't even have the same sword fighting style, it's a knight versus a samurai. But when it comes to their backstories, both had their fathers killed, their kingdoms usurped, and were forced to basically become a one-man army against a dark force that had utmost control over their land. Coupled with the sword forged by the gods, yeah, this works. Ike versus Guts. Surely you're using Guts. Giant swords, wandering medieval times, both molded by their loss. Guts far, far more tragically, but I don't think you would see Ike invited to party with Pikachu and Kirby if he went through even half of what Guts did. Roy versus Vargas. Side note, I love Brave Frontier too. Both Roy and Vargas are royalty. That's a theme for Fire Emblem characters, honestly. And they have giant fire swords. Both also take after their fathers, Ellawood and Avant. Krom versus Noctis. Both Krom and Noctis from Final Fantasy XV are princes who lead groups of 4. The shepherds and the main party from 15. Seeing these two interact mainly would be really funny to me, with Krom being overly charismatic and sort of aloof, versus Noctis and his whole shtick of trying so hard to act cool, but being a literal mental child throughout it all. And they both just have cool swords and powers. So it'd be fun. Lucina versus Grovile. Even if Grovile is the worst Hoenn starter line, the Mystery Dungeon iteration of Grovile would be fun. Nintendo's time-traveling blade users bent on changing the world. I mean, Leaf Blade was the Trico family's signature move. Robin versus Lana. Both cast spells indicted with many elements and face similar enigmatic forces of evil in Grima and Ganondorf. I guess, alternatively, you could do Robin versus Sia for the extra connection of, and spoilers for an 8-year-old game, they're evil too, or possessed by evil. Corinne versus Uden. Who is Uden? What is Dragalia Lost? Basically, it's another gacha game like Brave Frontier that Nintendo had a part of. It was popular for a year. Well, not like it didn't outlive Fire Emblem Fates, though. TLDR, anime boys with issues in their nobility and heritage, and they can turn into giant dragons. Byleth versus the Traveler. I'm gonna steal Byleth from the Fighters Pass section, because if anyone is gonna talk about no one's favorite DLC character, it's gonna be me, especially given his opponent for him, the Traveler from Genshin Impact. Both of these two were once gods, or at least divine beings, smited by a higher being that sealed their powers away. Both of them have most of their motif of attacking based off of time, Byleth's Divine Pulse being able to rewind time, and the Traveler using the past memories battle stance. And they're accompanied on their journeys by so-called deities too, in Sothis and Paimon. Onto the rest of the Fighters Pass?
Piranha Plant versus Chomper. These are like the exact same character design. Chomper probably wins, I want to assume, but if Death Battle makes a 6-minute analysis on both of these, I'm popping off regardless of the winner. Joker versus Giorno Giovanna. Not touching this one with a 50-foot pole. Erdrick versus Chrono. Akira Toriyama designed RPG characters. I've heard arguments for both planet and universe level Chrono, and I have no clue which is more legit, as well as if either of them are actually enough to win. Banjo and Kazooie versus Yuka and Laylee. Duos as iconic as Doug and Rob Walker. I have no clue who wins, but I really want to believe Banjo doesn't lose to a game I've heard is really shit. Plus, Nick really wants Banjo in Death Battle, and he's the guy who made the editing for Red Hood vs Winter Soldier as amazing as it is, so I really don't want his dreams to be crushed. Min Min vs Hisienko, is that? I don't know, I definitely did not pronounce that right. Min Min vs Hisienko or Jam. I didn't know which of these two to have Min Min fight, so I just decided to include both. All three of them are fighting game characters that own restaurants, and Hisienko has the extra connection of having stretchy limbs, much like Min Min. I've heard that Jam is more thematic and that Hisienko is more fair, but I only know Hisienko from the Marvel vs Capcom character select screens and Ducko thirsting over her, and I only heard of Jam like an hour before I wrote this. I don't really care which of them Min Min fights if she does get on Death Battle, but apparently she loses either way. Steve versus the Terrarian, a rivalry that's as old as the games themselves. It used to be really widely believed that Terrarian won, but now that Minecraft has more gadgets to work with, I'm not so sure. And that covers everyone. If you have any better matches for any of these characters, leave them in the comments. I'm genuinely interested to hear if there are any good opponents for anyone here that I just haven't heard of. Thank you to Brandon for covering all the Fire Emblem characters, and thanks again to ZDogS for making all the good looking thumbnails in this video. I'll have both of their links in the description. Go check their stuff out. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time when I'll cover the sheer genius behind the matchup of Slenderman vs Octodad.